Welcome to Meet the Polymaker. I am your host, Nikor, and this is episode 20. I finally went back and counted instead of guessing at the beginning of the show what episode it's on. 20. By the end of August, we will be at 6 months of consecutive shows every Thursday, every week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard, right here, Twitch, YouTube, and now TikTok. So thank you all for coming here. If you are new here and you haven't done so, you'll see everybody typing in, why are they typing in I am awesome? Well, right down there below. That's why. You can win a spool of Polymaker filament at the end of the show just by typing that in. You can type it in as many times as you want. It is only one entry that it'll put in for, but that will get you a spool of filament. That covers shipping, everything. So it is, when we say free spool, it's a free spool. Unless you get a really expensive one, that's on you. But with that said, this show is all about 3D printing news, really making news, maker news, and showing off community prints that are shared through our Discord. And then ultimately we meet a maker, a new maker every single week. We find a new guest, we go out there, we search the interwebs, and we find people that are involved in 3D printing or in making of some form, whether it be a major project, a company that's really cool that we love dealing with, or just many other things. Schools, there's a lot of things coming, a lot of people that we're working on getting that schedule filled up. So we are working on doing that 12-month, 52 weeks consecutive show. We're gonna hit it because I'm determined. So I like routine, and we've been doing it so far. So thank you all for sticking around for that. But again, real quick, type in I am awesome in chat for your chance to win, and we're gonna move right into the news. First up, we're gonna talk about 3D printed boats and do they float? We have seen 3D printed boats already. I believe there was a university in the Eastern US that has 3D printed a boat with a large 3D printer. So it's not necessarily new, but this one's new for Dubai. They are looking to be more eco-friendly, and they are looking for, of course, cheaper alternatives for transportation. So the Dubai Transport, it's actually the Road and Transport Authority, is working with a international private partner to create 3D printed ferries. These ferries will carry up to 20 passengers at a time and can actually just fully electric. So they're actually ran by two 10 kilowatt motors. So no gasoline, no fumes, no anything bad for the environment, other than the argument of batteries, which we won't get into. But still, they're looking to be eco-friendly and just a cool new way to transport people around. Of course, there's a lot of water around Dubai. They're looking to increase their tech exponentially. So 3D printing, of course, is a guarantee that they're going to implement that in a lot of things. I've never been there. I can imagine the boats aren't the first to delve into 3D printing, and I know it's not going to be the last. There's still many things to come. One of the achievements they had with it, marked down, which is the longest 3D printed single hull boat. They claim that. I wasn't able to verify with the university's boat because I thought that was a lot larger, but it might actually be just because of the length of it, not necessarily the mass. And then for the outside, they do use a stiff outer skin. It's known as a monocoque structure to create the form and the strength of the boat itself. One second, I had a pop-up come here. Oh, okay. we'll have to appeal that on TikTok. Sorry to TikTok. I think we're blocked right there for live for a minute. Anyway, sorry for the sidetrack there. This, like I said, I already talked about. It's fully electric and 3D printed. Dubai, they're up and coming. They're huge already, but they're doing great things. They'll continue to do so, I'm sure. So on to the next one, a STEMFI. I had to look that up just to make sure I pronounced it right. It's like a selfie, but it's a STEMFI. This is a 3D printed open source project, which people my age or around my age might recognize. It reminded me as soon as I saw it of the old Erector sets. If you don't know what those are, they were pretty much what you see here, but they were metal, they were thin metal, they were nuts and bolts. You put them together, make different shapes, different structures, anything your imagination could do. Not as precise as Legos, but it's a whole different type of thing. They used to, I think there were some motors you could get with them. I think now they made it into Connect, and I think that was more of a plastic offshoot of it. Before that, it was Lincoln Logs, if you're old enough. If not, you missed out. Lincoln Logs were amazing, but so are the Erector sets. So anyway, this is a free downloadable project that anybody can print. They have the prints very easy to print. They're flat. They're made with FreeCAD software. You're free to use and adapt them as you see fit. So you can modify them, you can add to it. It's just a cool open source project. a lot for educational, but even just to print out and give to the kids. You don't have to worry about all the nuts and bolts because it's got plastic rivets that you print, snap in place. The models that they have, they are upscalable up to 500%. They probably could be made larger, but they didn't verify that because of the tolerances. But these are all available. I put the website right there on the image, stemfee.org/download. They have them all there, all the files. Download them, let your kids create cool things. And if you do, if whether you create something or your kids create something fun, post them on our Discord and our show off prints, and might showcase you in the print show off. Just a fun, educational, and again, I'm old. Remind me of erector sets, which were amazing. Next up, Micronics. We have talked about the Micronics SLS printer in the past. Really cool project. It was a Kickstarter funded by I want to say a startup, but it was I'm trying to find here. I had the name written down somewhere. Anyway, it was a Kickstarter for a affordable, and I say affordable, it's $3,000 was the price point it was shooting for. A desktop SLS printer. For those that are only doing plastic, this is a little bit different, or really a lot bit different, of using powder, fusing the powder together to make amazing designs of metal material. They are no longer, I say no longer to an extent, they were bought out by Formlabs. Formlabs is a huge SLS company. They started manufacturing SLS printers in 2017. So they've been in the business. They went to make it basically easier to get SLS. I don't want to say affordable because they're still very expensive. Hopefully them acquiring Micronics maybe will still get us that cheap or affordable consumer SLS printer. Maybe they'll add their own touch to it. It's not a bad thing to have a big company behind the project to fix maybe some of the small things that were issues. But the gentlemen still work for Formlabs as advisors, or I'm not sure the details. So it doesn't mean everything is ended. They did end the Kickstarter. They did refund people. The people that got the refunds also got a voucher for Formlabs. I don't remember. I think it was $1,000. Don't quote me, but it was a decent voucher to purchase another one from Formlabs. I don't know if they have an expiration because Formlabs are pretty expensive printers. So there's probably not a lot jumping on that voucher real quick, but still, unfortunate to see small things get scooped up, but really for them, for the gentlemen that actually were creating it, amazing thing to be able to create something like that and somebody want to acquire it. So congratulations to them. It doesn't mean anything bad. Like I said, we could see this as still being a cheap printer that we can all, some, not all, get into SLS. The future will say, we'll see. Next up, pickleball. I myself have never played pickleball. I have seen videos and I've seen people play it. I don't know the rules. Looks a little bit like tennis, badminton, racquetball. I don't know. But I have noticed in the video, they're very loud. When you hit the ball, it is a loud, I think they considered it a thump. Let's see here. What do they call it? I need to organize these a little bit better. But either way, it's a startup out of Michigan, of all places, right north of me, the neighbors, of a company called Excel Digital Solutions. They have developed a quieter ball. From the looks of it, it looked kind of like the airless stuff. Whether it was taken from that design or something they were already working on, I'm not sure. But instead of making a loud pop, it is making a click noise. So what I didn't know this is they were actually, as co-founders Brandon Teets and Tyler Marvin, designed the ball to help alleviate court closures due to noise complaints, which I guess was a real thing in Michigan. I'm sure elsewhere too, that people weren't happy with courts being built close to their home and the loud noise that the game plays have. I figured like maybe a curfew would alleviate stuff like that, but they're actually closing courts because of it. So these guys wanted to develop these balls. They are selling them on their website for $30 a piece, and they are made out of a thermoplastic elastomer. And also one thing they did make sure too is they actually designed it to be certified for competitive play, so they can be an official ball in an official tournament. So I thought that was pretty different. And last but not least, we're going to look at Fractal Design. So this is a PC case manufacturer. I actually use one myself. They're usually a more modern, simplistic, minimalistic design. They have a new series, or a newer series, called their North series. It's similar to what you see on the pictures here, but they're PC cases. They actually use wood slats in the front for a nice aesthetic, but they overall make really good cases. What I thought was awesome is a big company like that actually developed a North Pi, which of course is a case for your Pi, your Raspberry Pi, not your edible pie, unless you're really, tenacious. But either way, this is a free download from Fractal Design on their website, where you can actually print all the pieces. They all lay flat. There's no crazy hard to print pieces. You can do it any color you want. There's clips that you can do the wood pieces if you actually want to get wood. There's a window on the side if you decide to go acrylic. But overall, it's fully 3D printed aside from the acrylic if you use the viewable side, and the screws and the heat inserts that it does use. I mean, it's overkill to some, depending how you're displaying it. A lot of times I had my pies in my workshop just sitting on a workbench or on the floor all plugged in. So this would make it look a lot better and keep it off of a bare concrete floor. So there are uses for it. It's actually developed to house up to two 40mm fans if you're really pushing that pie to its limits. I'm not sure what all you're doing with that pie, but you can cool it easily. It is 17 total components, 11 unique parts, and basically with this, I mean, it's possible it's going to lead to, number one, 3D printed PC cases, which we've seen kind of the more DIY stuff. But are we going to see manufacturers maybe start getting to this, where it's rather than just a customizable clip that you can print and snap into place? Is it a whole case? Is it a front piece? Is it something we can really customize and print out as a full case rather than just a Raspberry case? Hopefully, but we will see. With that said, we're going to move right to the print show off. And first up, we're going to look at a print / laser cut multi-material design and creation by TechJeeper. So this is using a laser cutter with wood. I think it's gold acrylic in the back with 3D printed. I don't remember. I think it was Starlight Neptune, if I'm looking at it, I believe, for the outside of the design. This is his own design, not currently available for download. I did ask him on the Discord, and right now it's not available. He's trying to decide where he's going to put it, if he does put it somewhere. But I thought it was cool. He's starting to, I'm actually seeing many things from TechJeeper on the Discord of multi-material or multi-process prints, or I don't want to say prints, but designs. He said using laser cutting, using 3D printing, and molding them together, making really cool prints. So appreciate the share there, TechJeeper. Next up, we have Silverback sharing a awesome Hue Forge. Of course, there's a lot of X-Men fans, Deadpool fans. If you're not, it's still a cool Hue Forge. The movie's coming up soon. What better Hue Forge to print than Deadpool and Wolverine? The Hue Forge itself was created by Lofi Layers. It is available in Maker World. So if you want to print that, if you've never done a Hue Forge, these things are easy as heck to print. You do not need an AMS. Standard printer, even an Ender 3 can do it. They are layer swaps, even though it doesn't look like it. There are layer swaps, and the link will actually show you which colors to use. You can kind of mess with them yourself if you want, but if you want this design, the colors will be there. So thanks for the share, Silverback. And next up, if I can click right, this is something that I've seen when he first got it developed or designed and out. An amazing Panchroma light box by none other than Pete or Shirtle 3D. He's our Lightbox ambassador for Discord, and he does amazing prints. He does amazing designs, takes logos. Oh, I see my mic clip over there. Logos and everything else for light boxes. He is, I think, 24/7, doesn't sleep, and is just nonstop designing. Often if you see him in our Hangout channel, he is designing something. He is always designing. And of course, with our new release of Families of Panchroma Fiberon, perfect way to represent Panchroma, the colorful family that we're all going to grow and love here in just a week. So 25th for the US of release of Panchroma Fiberon. Just the first wave. There's always more to come. So that was a really cool print. Maybe we'll see a Fiberon soon. And if so, we'll share it on the show. Thanks again, Pete, for the share. Next up, we're going to see one from Danny, also known as Neokoi Prince, also known as our Hue Forge, one of our Hue Forge ambassadors on the Discord. And he is big into cars. He does a lot of Hue Forges. He hand draws the graphics and does really neat things. His wall is plastered with him. Another guy that you'll see in the Hangouts, and you'll see all his designs behind him. This is not his design. It's designed by Sorpix. This is the tuned AE86, which I believe is a Toyota. It is available on Maker World, and I thought it was just, number one, multicolor is always cool, but just that little squatted tuned looking car. Usually you see them in drawings, kind of similar to what Danny does sometimes, but cool to see one that's just a 3D model. So thanks for that share, Danny. Last but not least, we see dragons a lot. This one I really love because number one, it's various dragons. I looked through, I think they're all Cinder Wing. If they're not, I apologize to the modeler, but looking from what I recognize on being the Patreon, Cinder Wing dragons. I don't know all their names, but using the new gradients, the season gradients. So really cool way to display those. Prints came out beautiful. It is by Curvy in the Geek. And these files, they're available on Cults 3D, Patreon, Mini Factory, a lot of places. If you search Cinder Wing 3D, you're going to find her everywhere. So she does really amazing models, and Curvy in the Geek did really amazing prints. So thank you for all those. As always, these are always pulled from our Show Off Prints channel in our Discord at discord.polymaker.com. So if you have a print that you're very proud of, post it in there. I go through every week and kind of choose. Like a lot of times there's so many to choose from and they're hard. So I just got to kind of randomize on which ones I pick. But if you have one you really like, share it to me. Tag me. Well, you can't tag me in that because it's a media only channel, but tag me and link it to me if you like. If there's something you think is really cool, maybe I missed it, definitely let me know. I'd love to share it. But with that said, we are soon going to be talking to our latest maker. He's waiting patiently behind the scenes backstage. So we do have commercials here we're going to break to. After those, we'll meet our next maker, and keep your eye out. There's a new commercial this week.
In a world where color has been lost, one company's scientists work round the clock to find a solution. Every day, the scientists harvest color from quantum rainbows, infusing them into one spool of filament.
Introducing Polymaker's new aesthetic product family, Panchroma.
A complex extraction process is used to harvest light from the sun, and it's added to the mixture. This process superheats the formula to its final form, and it's ready for extrusion.
This was a fun fictional representation of how Polymaker film is made purely for entertainment. Polymaker products are in reality developed by talented scientists in a lab.
Are you into cosplay and prop making? Are you tired of having to break out those power tools to sand those lines away? And don't forget about all that hand sanding. Cramps. Ouch. Introducing Polymaker's Cos PLA, available in two different versions, version A and version B. Both versions are still easier to sand than standard PLA. Find out more at us.polymaker.com.
Have you had bad customer service with your filament provider? Have you ever gotten a bad spool and never got a response when you emailed the company? Well, that won't ever happen when you reach out to Polymaker. Some people say that no company cares about you. Wrong. 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 If you never got a response after emailing a company that you've worked with in the past, you may be entitled to better customer service. We at Polymaker pride ourselves on good customer service, and we won't ever keep you waiting for a response. Email us now at support@polymaker.com, and we'll get back to you within one business day. We'll fight for you.
And welcome back to Meet the Polymaker. So those are our commercials. And as you've seen in chat, if you're in the Twitch land, is some of these commercials are user submitted. Some you see kind of our, Polymaker Sean. There's some we have with Nick. But some of them are community submitted. And when you do submit them, if we use it, there are some guidelines on our commercial channel on our Discord. But if we use it, $100 Polymaker coupon. There's a lot of new filament coming out. Get that coupon ASAP. We try to process them pretty quick. If it doesn't fit the guidelines, I get with you as soon as possible to get things changed. So definitely submit them. But thanks as always. We are here to, of course, meet our latest maker. If you're watching chat, you've probably seen there's a lot of filament makers here. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk to one right now. Uh-oh. I would say welcome in Mitch, but looks like we lost him. Give me just a moment. Maybe. Come on here. Pro streamer right here. There we go. Can you hear me, Mitch?
Yep, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yep, we are good to go. I don't know why it likes to kick you out of the scene, but
I don't know. I've got like the live stream up next to me, but it's like maybe 15 seconds behind. So I was sitting there just like watching the ads and stuff, and you're like, "Welcome in." I'm like, "Oh, geez, all right, it's time. All right, let's go."
Well, everybody, this is Mitch from Polar Filament. Thank you for being on the show. And for those that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Mitch. I work at Polar Filament. I do a lot of the R&D stuff. I also do kind of the outreach and stuff. So like if you've seen me on TikTok or YouTube or at events and stuff like that, I'm kind of the only person that likes to go out and talk to people. So I do that while everybody with the actual brains is back there doing the real work. They're doing all the filament manufacturing. So I came home early to do this and stuff like that, but I didn't actually have to run the line. But that being said, I've got my fair share of experience kind of doing everything from the ground up. So if there's any like really technical questions ranging all the way from like just like the polymer science all the way up to like the manufacturing side of things, feel free to toss them in chat. I'll keep reading them this whole time here. And if I see something that sounds interesting, just be warned, I tend to ramble about really technical things because I don't get to talk about technical things very often because you don't just walk around and see random people on the street who are interested in filament, let alone how it's made.
Did you know?
Yeah. Exactly. So when I get the opportunity.
Nick, we may have to ban Nick from asking questions because say you can go on a long spiel. He loves the science behind it all. He knows all that stuff. So we might have to get you guys in a closed quarter to talk for, I don't know, we probably should set aside 24 hours.
There we go, 24 hours.
I'm sure you'll have some questions. But and also real quick, thanks for rating in Digital Dragon. I just seen you come in there, but appreciate you coming in, everybody. This is Mitch from Polar Filament, and we're going to learn more about him here. So Mitch, of course, working with Polar Filament, you do 3D printing. When did you start 3D printing?
Let's see. I started printing in college, so around 2014. There was a makerspace. Well, actually, not even a makerspace. It was the IEEE lab. So it was a bunch of electrical engineers that kind of hacked together a 3D printer. I believe it was one of the like Mandelbrot's. And after printing around with that for a little bit, started getting involved with hackathons. Hackathons are, if anyone's not familiar with them, it's like usually a 24, 36 hour, 48-hour competition. Where you try to make something new and you try to make something do what it was not originally designed to do. So like a good example would be like if you turned a toaster oven into a circuit board reflow oven or something like that, that would be a good hack. And that was really where I started seeing 3D printers actually being used for something other than just kind of printing like memes, I guess, or something like that. Yeah. It wasn't early on, but it certainly wasn't what it is now today. So that was kind of what made me fall in love with it. Started getting into printing when I left. I started working at a machine shop and I got the opportunity to like work on my own 3D printer. It was all Stratasys at the time. And then my whole goal was trying to get it cheaper. And that led me more into like the hobbyist space. And it was mind boggling to watch as printers went from $20,000 to $10,000 to $5,000 to $1,000. And once you hit that 1,000 mark, now it's like people can officially buy them instead of companies. And ever since then, I mean, it's just been on this massive upward improvement. So I'm like super excited to see everything that comes out all the time. Now that like Polar Filament, the brand exists, I get to be a lot more involved in it. It's an excuse to go to all the conventions and see what's new, go on shows like this, kind of see all the fun stuff that's cooking up and be a part of it.
Oh yeah, and create your own, because of course you guys are have an ever-growing catalog, so some fun filaments, of course increasing that color range. Now, did you start with Polar Filament after they started, or were you in the beginning, or how was your start with them?
So Polar Filament is not a company; it's just a brand name.
Okay.
The parent company is Douglas Innovation, which has been around for longer than that. And Douglas Innovation is rapid prototyping. We have a print farm as well, and the brand was born out of COVID because at the time we had a lot of the jobs that we were doing. Sometimes people said use whatever. There's like, I just need this part. I don't care what you do. But other people were a lot more picky about it. And they're like, you have to use this specific filament, has to be this specific brand. You have to send it out for testing to make sure that that brand hasn't changed their formulas. And they were like really, really picky about it. And I mean, a lot of things got shaken up during COVID. I mean, it was like manufacturing plants were like shutting down or were blocked, and like they were kind of like doing holdover. So you saw a lot of like brands that were just changing their own recipes, or you saw new brands popping up or brands closing down. And it was so chaotic that it kind of like forced us to launch the brand itself. So we were manufacturing filament, and we're like, all right, you know what? Maybe it's time to open the doors to someone other than ourselves, because that allowed us to, I don't know, try more things, get into more colors and stuff like that. That wouldn't make sense if we were the only people consuming our own filament.
Yeah. Now with Douglas Innovations, they did rapid prototyping and everything. What was their first kind of push into using 3D printing as part of the prototyping, or as what they did?
Yeah, so Douglas Innovations is a startup from 2016, so it's a fairly new company. And everything was built in the automotive industry. I'm in Michigan, just outside of Detroit, so it's like a, I don't know,
The big
10-minute drive
three.
from here to downtown Detroit. And everything automotive is very fast, but it kind of is very all inclusive. So we started with wire harnesses, and wire harnesses are just a way to take. It's basically the central nervous system of a robot, and it's like, hey, we've got a motor over here and a motor over here. We need to connect them. So you make a wire that's just long enough, and then someone's like, actually, we're going to have the controller over here and two motors. Now you've got a wire that splits up, and then that turns into like, okay, now we've got this over here, these sensors, and then the next thing you know, these wire harnesses just kind of look like these organic spirals off of things. So we started with that, and then a lot of things started kind of just naturally growing, where it was we were taking like a sensor, and it was like, hey, we've got this weird sensor. We built the wire that connects to it. And they're like, hey, any chance that you could like connect the sensor to the wire for us? And we need to mount it somehow. And then that the mounting was like, okay, we need to build some sort of thing that can mount it. And for a while, we were just using like off the shelf hardware. But then we got into 3D printing, because then we could make custom mounts for these custom sensors that didn't exist, gave us a lot more flexibility. And then after that, it started turning into designing the sensors themselves. So that was where the electronics role came in. So at this point, it's kind of all encompassing. It's circuit boards, 3D printing, and wire harnesses is kind of the main gig there.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much any idea that you have kind of uses a combo of those three at this point. And it's usually like super fast turnaround projects. Like, I mean, we'll get called up for something that needs to be like designed, built, tested, and delivered in like 4 or 5 days or something like that. So really fast turn stuff.
Awesome. Now with Polar Filament, and of course, I don't know what you can answer and everything of internal stuff, but how big is the team that works at Polar Filament currently? I know it's probably growing, but
No, we're a small team. I mean, there's 13 of us there. So there's myself and 12 other people. There's everyone's very young. There's probably half of the people there are doing college part-time, and then the other half are there full-time. So it's very startup-y in terms of the culture there. I'm not allowed to post a whole lot of stuff like on the internet about pictures, but I'm super open to anyone that's local. I always bring people in and like give tours and stuff like that. I just got to be careful about what like stays on the internet, lives
Yeah.
on the internet
Oh,
forever.
yeah.
So I got to be
Just
really
that
careful
far
about
corner
it.
of the picture that has some proprietary stuff. Like, oh, I know
Yeah.
now. So,
And a lot of that is just because of the parent company too, because like we do a lot of these really proprietary jobs. It'll be automotive industry, so we've got like a car that's not coming out for 2 or 3 years. We'd get in a ton of trouble if we had something floating around on the internet of new like proprietary tech that we're building an enclosure for, or
you're not
something
just
like
closing
that.
down Polar Filament at that point. You're closing down
Oh yeah,
multiple entities. So, yeah,
yep, absolutely.
understandable. And you said because you're pretty much like right in northern Detroit, is that where you're located?
Yeah, so it's about like 10 minutes north of Detroit is where I live, and it's about 15 minutes north of Detroit is where Polar Filament is. We're in Troy, Michigan. Pretty much, if you're unfamiliar with Michigan, there's the center of Detroit, and then there's Metro Detroit, which is like a very large radius around that, which is where kind of all the manufacturing for automotive is. So saying Metro Detroit usually means you're within like an hour of Detroit, basically.
Fair. Yeah, that's like in Columbus, Ohio, it's the same as anywhere you're going. Columbus is decently sized, but anywhere you go, it's 20 minutes away, and no matter what. So now with being open to the public for to an extent, do you guys have a retail spot in your facility, or is it just manufacturing?
No, so we leverage the manufacturing side of things a lot more than the brand. So anything that's resale is going to be under a different brand. So that's not going to be our own brand. We'll white label to like hobby shops and stuff like that if they want to have their own branded filament, or just any sort of reseller. So there's people ranging from like hobby shops to game shops to full on other distributors that have their own websites and all sorts of things like that. And then we really just made our Polar Filament brand as a way for us to have more say in things. So like if there's a new color I want to try personally that no one else wants to like pick up, then it's really upsetting if I can't make it. So
Yeah.
Polar Filament is basically my opportunity to try what I want to do and then post it on a website. And if somebody wants to try it out, they can. I already saw it looked like Nick was that. Yes, is that Nick running the
Yeah,
Polymaker
Paul.
3D
Yeah,
account
so
right now?
Polymaker. If I
Yeah, he
post or Nick
posted
posts
the
right now, it's both. But yeah, it's Nick if you've seen it right now.
yeah, he posted the April Fool's
Yeah,
filament that I had
he,
because
he loved
the
that, and he loved the
yep,
video with it for
yep,
sure. So
the super duper deluxe tough high speed PLA plus plus.
yep.
It
And then
was I don't
of
know.
course you got your blooper, and with Nick's accent, it always sounds even funnier when he says it. The way he says blooper. So, but he got a kick out of that when he first saw that. So I think
Yeah,
he
so
loves your energy for sure.
I'm glad I get to do stuff like that. Otherwise, if I was doing it for somebody else, I probably wouldn't have that freedom. So
Now you said too, like if with when you want a different color and everything else, is that something if needed that you could do on your own? You know how to run all that stuff and do that, or is it kind of you get with so and so and so and so and develop something together, or how does that like the team dynamic made?
yeah, it depends on scale. So like we can do everything in house, and we often do a lot of things in house for the R&D side of things.
Yeah.
But after that, it's more of it then turns into business side of things. It's no longer R&D. So then it becomes what is more profitable. Are we going to have like we're not good at making colorants and compounding colors and stuff like that. So like we can do it, but then when we're doing it at a larger scale, we don't want to do it. And luckily, the Metro Detroit area has a lot of plastic manufacturers for car parts. So I don't have to go very far when I want to like find somebody that can actually make colorants for us or make like custom plastics for us. I have like plastic suppliers that are just all over that come to tour, and they just go to the big three as well as a bunch of automotive suppliers, and then they add us to that list. So sometimes I'll just be at my desk, we get a knock at the door unannounced. It'll be like, hey, I work at this big plastic company, I want to know if you want to try out our plastic. And I'm like, that's a weird door-to-door salesman, but
Yeah,
I don't know, we got a lot of weird stuff in the shop now at this point. So
there you go. Always welcoming, like I said. If it grows the business and get you out there even more, then why not?
yep.
Now, with the of course the manufacturing side of things, you got the big three there, so that gives you kind of I want to say unlimited resources. But is there anything else that you guys do big within the 3D printing? Of course, other than the filament, but with your own filament on creation.
Yeah, so once again, influenced by the automotive world, it's all about analytics, reliability. Like there's two types of reliability. There's brand reliability, which is like, hey, I trust this brand. I don't really know why. I just have good experience with them. I've never had a problem with it, but like I don't have any quantifiable reason. And then there's the like reliability from like an engineering standpoint, which is like, okay, even though you trust the brand, how can you put a thing in check to make sure that they're actually cooperating? And automotive doesn't care what your brand is. They don't care what your company is. They care about making sure that the numbers line up. They want a spec. They want a number where they can say, hey, you met this number, you're good. You met this number, you're bad. Um,
Yeah.
so like all of our production is very very number based, ranging from the normal stuff like tolerance and ovality to like some really obscure stuff, like being able to measure like light deflection and transmission distance and color and all sorts of weird surface finish and stuff like that. And then also going into like vicat softening points. So like we have a lot of data that's on every single spool, and we have to collect it for our automotive customers. And once we had that, we're like, we might as well just slap it on the consumer brand one too. So like we have those little QR codes, and it just has data that probably doesn't matter to most people, but hey, we collect it, so you might as well look at it.
Well, and that shows too, though. I mean, I'm sure it helps in keeping you guys in check for consistency and everything else. I'm sure there's things in order that, oh, hey, for some reason this batch is off on transmission distance or whatever it may. So
Yep.
it
And it's
definitely
super
helps that
granular.
quality.
Like even things like how many steps our motor makes that like is pushing out like the colorant to mix everything. We've got every single motor that's on the entire machine, whether or not it's colorant or hauler or the screw itself or a mixer, everything is logged on there. So that way we can always go back and like check it for reliability. So if we ever forget something, we're like, hey, not just what percentage did we use, but like how much was it stressing the motor to push that out? And we can kind of see some
You
like
got the
weird errors
exacts.
before they have an error. Yep.
Now with your different colors, and of course developing more colors as polar filament itself, do you obviously some of the materials probably decided among between who wants it and how many they want, but color wise, do you have a process of how you decide what the next color is? Do you kind of do community feedback, or is there any formula to it?
Yeah, it's pretty driven by the rep rep festivals. Whenever we go there, that's usually like kind of where I test the water. I see what people are looking for. People go around to booths and ask for certain things that either do or don't exist. One of the annoying things, though, is up until recently, we didn't get to really experiment with colors because, like, you can't have three colors. You can't have like black, white, and red, and then work on some like weird shade of chartreuse or something like that.
Yeah,
Like, no, you got to have your
the
black, your
base.
white, then your red, yellow, blue, and then you got to get your basic colors like your green, oranges, and purples, and you got to have that base. And there's a lot of colors too, because like I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
even with that, we have three different types of grays, and then people will come in, they'll be like, "Hey, what's your light gray?" And they're like, "Ooh, do you have anything lighter?" I'm like, "No, we already have three grays. Do I have to make a fourth gray now just to be even lighter?" So there's a lot of colors out there, and I try to do the ones that are unique, I guess. So it might not seem like a lot, like a gray, finding the right gray, but if you get different brands, they've already got the other shades done. So I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll fill in that void that a different brand hasn't done just to kind of be an option. That way I'm not like stepping on toes too. And I'm like, hey, you want a good dark gray? These guys, you want a good light gray? All right, that's where I'll take that little area. So I like to do a lot of stuff like that. But recently we finally like hit what I think is a pretty solid color platform. I think we have like
Yeah.
for PLA is probably around like 35 or 40 like just normal colors, and now we get to look into the fun novelty stuff finally. So like once again, you can't have like fluorescent until you've got the primary colors, but now we're doing like the fluorescents, the sparkles, the silks, the color changing. The temperature one has been a lot of fun. Chameleon. And then we've got a few other ones that are kind of in the chamber, still in testing, but they'll come out eventually.
I say is one of the newest ones is the color changing blue, right?
Yep. Yep.
You
So
showed me that at Murph, and that was I liked the way it changed. But I'll let you talk about it because it's a little bit different than some of the ones you have to kind of heat up.
yeah, so this one was because I was on a website and I was browsing expired patents, and I was just kind of seeing like what is out of date now, and I found one that was from McDonald's when they did color changing spoons for their ice cream, and I found the company that produced it on the patent. I reached out, and sure enough, they still exist. So they basically did a lot. McDonald's and Starbucks did a lot of work to get something that would change color at a very like I'll call it a human range, meaning at room temperature it will be one thing, and if a human touches it, it will change there.
Mhm.
There's a lot of color changing stuff that will go from like room temperature to like freezing. So if you put it in a freezer, it will change colors, or they'll
The
have ones that like if you
drastic
boil
stuff.
the water, it'll
Yeah.
change color. But like no one's gonna do that. It's gonna be a desk ornament. So this is something that like if you pick it up and you touch it, it will change from blue to white. And it worked out really well. So at this point, I've got more of those colors in the works. They take so long to get moving though. So eventually they'll come out. But
There you go. Yeah,
the
it
blue is the
was
only one
really neat.
available.
It reminded me of the old, like you said, the human range of colors is. You're probably way too young for this, but back in the day, we had T-shirts that had I don't know if it was a dye or what it was that you could put like handprints on, and it was just that's how that I use that for those that do remember those shirts. Is that's how that filament works? I think you had the polar bear printed in it and just holding it. Now, Murphy was hard because it was just hot, and so it stayed at the hot range, but you still got that color range, and it worked really well. So
Yeah,
interesting seeing what
Murph, it
comes
was
out more
so
there.
hot because like normally it's a dark blue, like a really, really dark blue. And then you touch it and it turns completely white. But at Murph, it was just so hot that it was basically a really light blue and it turned white when you touched it. And
Yeah.
there was one day that there was barely any color change because it was just so hot out that its natural color was almost completely colorless at that point.
Oh yeah, but still a nice effect, and it worked well even in the very humid area of Goshen, Indiana.
Yeah, and there was I ended up giving a spool to a handful of like YouTubers, and one I gave I think it was I'm going to mess up his name. It was like HL Tech Mods or something like that. And I completely didn't tell him it was color changing. So he like posted a video and he's like, I don't know what's going on, but it's blue here and it's white here on the printer. It's not, I don't know what's going on. Did I mess something up? And then I like messaged him. I was like, oh yeah, it's color changing. So then
so those, because those are probably
it.
like early spools, so they didn't have like a official retail stamp on it, did it?
No, it just said magic color, because whenever we
yeah,
come out with a name or like a color, we always have to name it before we see what it looks like, because you can do like lab tier extrusion where you do it on a smaller machine, but usually we just kind of send it on the full extrusion line. We'll run a small batch of like 50 to 100 spools or something. But then we have to give them a label, and then we just have to make up a color before we even know what it looks like. So they just get a name, they get labeled, and once they're off the filament line, they get sealed up. And then we're like, I'm not going to crack open every single one of those and relabel them. So we just, the first like launch of whatever a color is just whatever the original name is. Some of them are like horrible names too. Like we're like, oh, this is going to be a nice purple color, and then it just comes out and it's not even close to purple, but they say purple on them. So if you get one of the early rolls, you'll get one of the limited time misnamed filaments.
Now, we're talking about names of filaments and everything. Of course, you had the super duper tough PLA plus, and then also you have the Bloopeter, which I said, like, so who is that? Just randomly who comes up with the names? You guys kind of throw a dart at a dartboard? Is that usually one guy that's like, hey, I got a quirky name?
Usually I get the final say of things. But one of the guys that's kind of like in charge of running the line, his name is Alex. I was gone or something one day, and he just like snapped a pic. He like needed to add a color, and he was gonna try something experimental, and he didn't know what to call it, so he called it Bloopeter. Took a picture of it, posted it on our Discord, and then everyone's like, Bloopeter, we like the name. So then it just kind of stuck at that point, and I was like embarrassed at first, but I'm like, you know what? No, I guess we'll be a little bit more fun with our names. So we're kind of going back through and taking some of our dumb names and renaming them, which is easier said than done, because people are like, where did that color go?
Oh yeah, if they're used to that name. Yeah. Yep. I've learned too, talking with people at the rep events and even through Discord, is they want to know what the color is, and that's where like some companies go crazy with the name, and it's like, blah blah blah. It's like, well, what is that? A black? Is it a yellow? Is it a red? So yeah, I know a lot of people like to know what they're expecting out of the spool to be named that, but you can still have some fun with it. Just gotta blah 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 red.
We have colored numbers, which I don't know if a lot of people see it. It's in really tiny font next to the color name. Color number will never change. If it's color, it's like 64, it will forever be color 64 if we rename it. So you can like search for that number on the website, and it will take you to whatever it is.
There you go. That way you know it's the original one you fell in love with.
Yep, and it's easier to write that on the bottom of like those little bears that we take for the color swatches. So you can just put it on the bottom for like the foot and just say like 64 instead of like writing out on it like the full name of it, because
cornflower blue. And
exactly. Yep.
Super, especially the super duper PLA plus. Just run out of room unless you're doing a high scale polar bear.
Oh yeah.
But now, as Mitch said earlier too, is if anybody has any questions for Mitch, whether it be super technical, just about the filament, about the company, about Mitch himself, definitely ask now. We're going to go through, I think there's probably already some questions, but
I was watching them come through. I've been trying to like work the answers in. So I saw like going all the way back to Royal Nomi was asking about putting the QR codes on the filament. So I talked about that. We're already collecting data. We already had to make a portal to display it to other people. So just kind of decided to open it up to everybody else. Let's see what else is there in
Epic
here.
Man 340 on Twitch, which is just, the question is, batch variation or color lots and time frame, which kind of shortened.
Yeah, color is something interesting. I have like a famous phrase, which is that, or somebody else said this, but a target is only a good target until it becomes a metric, and then it fails to be a good target. Or sorry, a metric is only a good metric until it becomes a target, and then it fails to be a good metric. And what that means is people usually come up with a way to kind of like grade things. So like if you're grading filament, what makes good filament from bad filament? So people like take a number, and one good example for like just normal filament is tolerance. And we're like, okay, we're going to stick this number on each spool, and then if it's got a low tolerance, a really low variance that's in there, that's a good spool. And if it's got a high number, then it's bad. Well, one of the things that's kind of annoying, though, is then that becomes a target for anyone that's making it. They're like, okay, I want to make good filament. I just need to get my number as low as I possibly can. Now, that being said, you can take whatever shortcuts you possibly need to get to those numbers. So Just one example for tolerance is having a spool that has absolutely no spikes in it is very, very challenging. You can have it's very easy to make a spool of filament that is basically perfect, but might have one death spike that might jam your printer. So, like one example is when somebody says, "Hey, our spool is 99% under this tolerance." I'm like, "Yeah, that's very easy to do. Having one that's 100%, it's that last 1% that makes it really challenging."
No.
So tolerance is one of those things that didn't really used to matter until somebody started measuring it, and now it does matter. And the one that I think is really cool right now that's going on is all the Hue Forge stuff.
Oh, yes.
So not just color, but also transmission distance. That was something no one cared about before, so it wasn't measured. And as soon as it started being measured, you started to see variance between batches. And now it's to the point where it matters a lot. We're working on the ability to measure and correct and basically be consistent on things that your eye can't really see. If you make two batches of filament, you might end up with two that have slightly different transmission distances. Like literally, the humidity in the air can affect the torque on the screw, which affects how much colorant gets put in, and it's like imperceptible to your eye. But if you have a good enough sensor, you might be able to see something like that. So we're working on step one is we need to be able to measure that. Once we can have a number that we can do to grade that, then we can start to like strive for lowering that number. But it turns out that just like tolerance can kind of vary with the thickness of your filament while you're making it, so can the color and so can the transmission distance. Oh, I lost myself there. See if I can fix
And
that.
it sounds like you guys need to get a industrial TD1 and get that set up in the lines.
Yeah, that's basically what it's kind of turning into. I did talk to Ajax, and I do have a TD1 and stuff. It's not quite up to what I would need for industrial. It'd be very good
Oh,
for
yeah.
like a personal type thing, but for industrial, I need to like make sure that's extremely consistent between lines. That I have a way to calibrate it. So I need to know like, is my sensor dying? Is my TD1 acting up, or is everything fine? So there's like a lot of redundancy, a lot of calibration that goes into it. And
Oh, yeah.
at that point, it's kind of not even the same anymore. So it's actually really, really surprisingly difficult to do while everything is running. While everything is kind of going quickly, you can't
Flowing
take as
through it.
many
Yeah, you can't just
snapshots.
stop. Yeah, I was just saying it's got to go, and you hope that it. Oh, and I'm sure things too like that is with that kind of sensor, even at an industrial grade level, dust. A speck of dust can probably throw it off and
Yep.
halt. Now, if that were to happen, like when doing a line, how does it work when you like? Let's say whatever reason you have to stop the line. Is it something that you basically have to cut here, restart from the beginning, or is it something you kind of continue and the machines can catch up with it, or
That is where we create our famous Doug spools. So the parent company, as I mentioned, was called Douglas Innovation. We never stop the line, but we do try to fix the problem. And then anything that happens in between there gets basically marked as basically a do not sell spool. Um, we're very picky with what we can do for our automotive customers, and we just kind of like follow up that with everything else. So a lot of these like Doug spools that we get, we set them aside. Some of them are so bad that no one wants to print with them. So those ones end up being depending on the material, they can be reused, recycled, and then things like PLA. There's not really a good way to recycle those, so those end up getting completely scrapped. But everything else that is kind of marked as a subpar spool, unsellable, those are the ones that all the employees at work get to just kind of play around with, take home, experiment with. So like I've got my printer next to me, and all of those are all like the reject spools. Some of them are like just a little bit too thin, some are a little bit too thick, some are totally perfect, but at some point it's just going to have a spike and it will jam or maybe jam your printer, maybe not, maybe it powers through it.
to be luckily, yeah,
um,
if it pushes right through, yeah.
Yep. And I do know, so we've slowly been allowing other people to get their hands on those spools. Those are usually the ones I take to conventions. So if you come to our booth, we're usually printing with like our reject spools, all the bad ones. And then sometimes I hand those out to other people. And just this last one, I handed them out to a few like influencers, people that are making videos and stuff, which I was a little bit scared about because I'm like, all right, this is a bad spool. But basically people have been burning through the whole spools and they're like, I had zero problem. So it made me feel a lot better. I'm like, all right, even the stuff that we're rejecting,
Hey, our low grade
still
prints.
usable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're slowly starting to open that up. And now like we get asked a lot. I'm sure like Nick from Polymaker and stuff knows as well about like donations and sponsorships and stuff like that. I'm slowly starting to kind of dial that up. And if somebody needs filament for a project, I usually say, hey, here's our reject spools. hopefully it works for you if that's enough, because as we continue to grow, we make more and more reject spools, and we're
Yep.
consuming a kind of a fixed number of them for our own internal print farm, but we're starting to produce them faster than we consume them. I'm just super picky about it because I really don't want too many of those going out there, and then if it gets in somebody's hands, if it gets like handed down a few times to somebody else, and then they get their first spool of polar filament and it just happens to be a reject spool and they don't know it, and they're like, man, this
It's
stuff
that
is
last half
horrible.
that was just horrible.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm trying to
Bad
avoid
first
stuff like that.
experience. Yeah. Now you talked about recycling. Of course, the PLA not being something you can recycle. We talked a little bit before. What can you recycle? I know right now it's just an internal recycling. It's not that you're taking in, scrap. But what can you guys recycle in house?
Yeah, we don't take internal scrap, or we don't take scrap from like hobbyists. We do from businesses. PLA is infamously challenging to recycle. I am not a materials engineer, or I don't know the exact chemistry, but I will try to recite the stuff from the people that do know what they're talking about. So, as many people know, PLA is a bioplastic. It's kind of pitched as being good for the environment because it can degrade. However, it is like industrially compostable, which means that it will break down as long as you're at a high enough temperature or a high enough pressure. But the problem is that room temperature and room pressure is not enough for that to really break down. So you can toss it outside, it can sit through all the weather, and it's going to be basically unfazed. That being said, if you heat it up like in boiling water or something like that, it'll basically turn back into like a powder. It like disintegrates. So we've got a hot water bath that we use for production, and we had some PLA printed parts that were just like filters and stuff like that that were not supposed to be printed in PLA. They were supposed to be in something else. And then after seeing them for a while, you just touch it and they just turn right into a powder because they've been sitting at basically 60 degrees Celsius or higher, which is the glass transition temperature, for a long enough time that they truly start to biodegrade. So that being said, PLA has a kind of a heat up history. Like you can only heat it up so many times. If you keep heating it up too many times, it will degrade. So that means that when you're kind of reheating it again to recycle it, it's already been heated up to be manufactured the first time, turned into filament again, and then anytime beyond that, it just starts to get pretty brittle pretty quick.
Getting less and less. Yep. Now
Yep.
with PETG, so like PETG, ASA, and you said you're. Can you talk about what you were talking about before the show on what you do recycle?
I can say something. So like the new one
Yeah.
that we were just doing today for the first time was nylon 12. So we're working with a big company here. I don't think I can say exactly who it is yet, but I
that's
did
fine.
get
Yep.
permission to at least say that we're doing it. We're taking basically scrap SLS powder from SLS printer manufacturers and turning that back into filament for FDM machines. So the
Awesome.
nylon 12 is kind of a test print. It went surprisingly well. I mean, it took some smart people to get everything up and running, but at this point we have the first few rolls and stuff. We did our first couple of test prints on it. I say as R&D, 90% of the stuff that I do never sees the light of day, because like maybe you make good filament out of it and then you go to print with it and it's just horrible. Or sometimes it's weird, unpredictable stuff. Like TPU is really challenging because it cools down and shrinks when it cools, which can like rip apart spools. Like you spool it up and everything's fine. You let it sit overnight, and then the spool is just disintegrated the next day because it got smaller and smaller and smaller, and it
You just
strangled the
compressed
spool.
it. Yep.
So like weird things like that always pop up. But yeah, PETG, ASA, nylon, everything, all of that is fully recycled at this point. So those are very easy to recycle materials as well, unlike PLA.
Awesome. Let's see here. I need to try, see if there's any other ones I missed. Yeah. Nick asked if you are also dealing with customers' tickets and complaints. What is the funniest, interesting ticket you have had?
I don't know. That's going to be a tricky one. We get, I would say, I don't know if this is super funny, but it's probably like one of the most common ones that we get is if somebody's trying the filament for the first time, if something goes wrong, then the first thing that they do is they reach out to us, which makes sense. But after doing some debugging, like the first things that I usually ask for is I'm like, okay, as stupid as it is, I know everyone like loses it online, but when somebody says, hey, did you try leveling your bed? I would say leveling bed solves about 95% of our tickets. So when somebody says, did you level your bed? That's why they're saying that.
Yeah.
I usually ask for a picture as the first thing I do, because that's usually where you can see like if the nozzle is scraping across the bed and you're like, oh, well, your filament's not coming out because you're just putting the Grand Canyon in your print bed right now. But then there's a few other things that are pretty common that just cause issues. There's like heat creep. So like if somebody's one really common thing is the nozzle will be too low, it'll scrape on the bed. So the first thing somebody does to debug is not level their bed, but rather to crank up their temperatures. And they'll crank up the temperature higher and higher and higher and higher, and then you get massive heat creep. And now you've got this giant glob of plastic in your up in the like heat break area. So at that point, there's no amount of bed leveling that's going to fix that problem. But when I see the picture, I see the scrapes on the bed. I tell them to level the beds. And then at that point, it's still not working. And then it usually kind of turns into this discussion of, well, this is the only problem that I've never had this problem with any other brand. And then that's usually the thing that I got to like work through. The hardest thing that I ever have to tell someone is to go back and print the same print that they did with the other filament. And I'm like, hey, let's take the scientific approach. You can't get this to work. Do the same thing that you already did before this. And I feel like it's pulling teeth with that question specifically because they're like, I already did that. I just did that one like 2 hours ago and it worked totally. I'm like,
my
do it
last
again.
print was just fine. Like,
Do it one more time. If you do it one more time, you'll convince me that it's me that's a problem. And then that's usually where it like turns into like, oh, well, now that stuff's not working either. And I'm like, okay, it is. We've gotten out of the world of filament problems. Now we're moving into the world of debugging. So then it's just narrowing it down at that point. Hey, is it the nozzle? Is it the heat break? Is it the extruder motor? Is it firmware, slicing? So I usually walk
so
people
many
through that.
variables.
Yep.
Then Adam over in YouTube asks, if a maker wants to have a color made out of an existing puller filament line, is that something you offer?
Hold on, I got to read that in person.
Yeah,
out of an existing polar filament line.
A color made out
Is
of
that in? Oh,
What
I
do you
see
mean
it
what-
in YouTube here.
Oh, I'm
color
thinking
made out
it
of
is
existing.
I think he means by changing, or they like the red, but they want a red with a lower TD or higher TD. Sorry, usually higher. Is it something that you can do?
The smallest batches that I ever do are usually 50 kilograms, which is pretty off-putting to a lot of people. That being said, we switched it from being a minimum batch size to just a fixed dollar amount. So usually any sort of like, if it's a truly new custom color, we charge about $300 for that. So if somebody says, hey, I've got like skin tones are a good example. Someone's like, hey, do you make skin color filament? I'm like, hey, I'm here to tell you there's a lot of skin colors out there. What exact shade do you want?
Yeah.
So, and everybody wants something different. So for something like that, usually color match it and get spot on. And if you want one spool, it'd be $300. If you want two spools, it'd be like $320. So they kind of move up from there, which some people find doable and some people find is not doable. Other ways that we can make custom colors are by mixing existing colors. So some people that resell our filament say, hey, I'm looking for, I mean, a good example is a lighter or darker color. So if someone says, hey, I like your gray, or I want a lighter gray. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what our existing gray looks like. And they're like, can you make it lighter? So I can't make it a specific light gray, but what I can do is start adding basically white into it to make it lighter and lighter. And that's kind of just experimental. If I'm like, okay, if I do 50% white and 50% gray, I don't know exactly what shade of gray it's going to get, but it will be lighter. So we do a lot of stuff like that, which is obviously the cheapest thing because I don't have to buy or lab match anything. I'm just kind of mixing existing colors together. And then lastly, there's a few different things of just like taking our existing colors and just kind of like tweaking the process on it, like making it a little bit less potent or more potent. I know like getting a blacker black is a really common thing that I get asked. So those
Never
once
black
again,
enough, ever.
yep, those are super easy to do. That's just a matter of like dialing up a setting and just saying, all right, make it more or make it less. Once again, it just has to be, it depends on how much time you have too. So I know, for example, we were making fluorescent colors and somebody wanted one that was like a much more subtle fluorescent color. So we just kind of dialed it down. But I said, hey, if you only want, they only wanted like 4 or 5 spools of it. And I'm like, I'm not going to spin up a batch for just 4 or 5 spools. But I said, hey, give me about a month and we'll probably be out of that color. And then the next time we do it, I'll just at the very end, I'll crank down
Push to the
the
lighter
setting.
color.
Yep. Grab the last 4 or 5 spools and they're all yours. So there's all sorts of different ways to do that.
Yeah, and then I will do one last question from the community. Nick has a million, as I knew he would. Hey, he has a 2-part. So have you ever thought of a way to standardize your color communication to customers using Hex, Pantone, RAL, RAL?
Yeah, it turns out it's a lot more complicated than that, as you already know. There is no one number for plastics. So one, like in the automotive world, when I was first getting started, I just wanted like red. I was like, hey, I need red. And they're like, okay, what red? And I'm like, I don't know, like just a nice standard red.
Red.
And
Yeah.
that was where, after like meeting with people in person, I learned that it's not just a shade of color, but it's also like the spectral, diffuse, and ambient light. You've got like these three color factors that all kind of compound to give what you see. It's the whole like the black and what is it, black and yellow dress versus blue and
Oh,
white
the
or
blue
whatever.
and
It's that
the
whole
blue
thing.
and
I'm like,
black, gold and white. Yeah.
yeah. So how you perceive color is different than how you can measure color. And it's our eyes are really messing with us all the time. So like Pantone is really popular for being like a color standard, but it really doesn't work so great with plastics because the shine really messes with things. If it shines and it's lighter, it has a weird shadow. It kind of looks like not the same.
Oh yeah, the TD
Um,
changes it and everything else. Unless you're just doing a zero TD, like you said, that all the different surface effects and transparency and everything else. So
So
it's
at my point, this is new stuff as well. Like, I mean, this is not something people cared about before. They didn't need a standardized color kind of number for it, but it is growing now. So honestly, I've been leaving it up to like the filament colors.xyz or the filament library. They
yeah,
they
yep.
do the like hex colors.
The little
It's nice
swatches and everything.
because yeah, because they are the same people. They are doing their process over and over again. Whether or not it's right or wrong, it's at least consistent, which
Yep.
is really big. So if they have two different yellows and they say that this one's lighter than this one, it will be lighter than that one. They might not have the exact color. That being said, at this point, it's kind of just up to filament companies. I mean, myself, Polymaker included. I mean, if there's a way to collaborate and just say, hey, let's measure it this way, it kind of, in my opinion, doesn't matter what way it is as long as it's the same way. So that way, if you want to say,
Consistent.
hey,
Yep.
what's Polymaker yellow versus polar filament yellow, and to actually have a number to kind of like correlate those. So if that ever wants to turn into something real, I'm all ears for something like that.
There you go. And speaking of yellow, this isn't necessarily a question, but a statement made by Zombie, who is the yellow aficionado, said, "Did you know that Polar has the most yellow that he's printed with?" So you got the yellowest yellow.
Yeah, and actually, the yellowest yellow is kind of almost
You're gonna.
untrue. The
I was
yellowest
thinking you're gonna
yellow
ruin
is
it for Zombie
very
now.
good in PLA, but it looks horrible in like PETG and
Others.
ABS just because of the base color of the resin itself. So it was color matched specifically for PLA. So I'm sorry, it only exists in PLA. If you print in other materials, it's pretty ugly color.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Yep.
Well, with that, we're running close to time, so we'll do our quick rapid fire questions. We'll dig deep into that brain and just quick, easy answers. First off, I ask everybody, what is your favorite filament color and material? And that can be your own brand. It's okay.
Oh, you want me to answer that?
No,
Or are you asking everybody else?
I'm asking you. Yep. Yeah, these are all for you.
All right. Favorite color would have to be magenta. It was my least favorite color and became my favorite color because you cannot represent what it looks like on your computer screen. Like if you hold up a spool next to your screen, it just never, ever, ever looks like, which was frustrating. And now it's my favorite one. Honestly, for materials, it's probably got to be a really hard TPU. It prints as solid as you want it to be. I like something that's not going to be squishy, but if you like drop it or throw it at the ground or run over it with a car, it won't break.
It's got that flex. Yep. So next question, does the polar bear have a name?
Yes, the polar bear does have a name. So I will try to keep this as quick as I possibly can. When I was younger, when I was in high school, I had some friends, and they had this weird looking polar bear sculpture. It kind of looked like an anteater type polar bear. It's our old logo. If you go to douglasinnovation.com, it's still the Douglas Innovation logo. And it was just weird. We used to play around with it. It was made out of ceramic. We'd toss it back and forth. We'd like put it under our shirts. We'd just mess around with it all the time. And then when we all went to college, people came over to his parents' house and they were like, "Oh, I see that you have a Gordon Newell piece over there." And everyone's like, "A what?" And they're like, like the famous sculptor. And it turns out it was like a family heirloom and it was like a piece of art. And it was very expensive. So then from that point on, when we came back, they're like, "No, you can't touch it anymore." So we loved
This
it.
is special.
And that was the two of them that started Douglas Innovation with me. So we had like that common point. I don't know why we call it Duncan, but its name is Duncan. It's always been Duncan. There's probably a reason. I just forgot about it. But yeah, that's Duncan the polar bear.
There you go. Nice little backstory. So speaking of Duncan the polar bear, who would win in a fight? Coca-Cola bear or Duncan?
old Duncan or new Duncan? Because new Duncan went on a workout routine, so old Duncan was kind of like goobery. Coca-Cola Bear would probably beat the old Duncan, but the new one been doing a lot of self-improvement there. I don't know. He's pretty sharp. He's low poly. I think new Duncan would win.
There you go. Next up, how many injuries did you sustain at your first few rep events when you were hand spooling the samples or the giveaways?
No injuries for that. More injuries probably just like taking apart prints because we were trying to like rapid fire them and we didn't have we didn't have the types of printers that we have today where you can do like multi-material and multi-support and stuff like that. So it was just a matter of like the day before we were actually going, I tried to throw this whole thing together. So I was ripping parts off printers. I cut myself a few times. I was trying to like screw this together in like a piece of wood. Like everybody else was in the car. They're like, hey, let's go. I was like screwing stuff into my hand and stuff like that. So my hands were bleeding before the rep festival, but honestly, operating, it was fine while we were there.
And for those that weren't at any of the festivals when they started coming to them, is they had basically a unwinder, I guess, and he would wind probably 150.
It was like 50 gram samples.
50, okay, and wind them, zip tie them, and then that's it. There you go. And it was just put a spool on, do it till it's done, and you'd hear it wind up. I think there was a drill on the original one.
Yep, it was a drill. Yep. There's so many better winders now. Because I looked around, I was like, I don't want to design this. Like, I'm going to be really bad at it and stuff. But like now, with all the like bamboo printers and people rewinding their spools and stuff like that, there are some really sophisticated rewinders that go back and
forth and level it out. So
I was doing that by hand. I was just kind of like nudging it to the left and the right on the original one.
Yep. So then last question: if I am looking for a great filament with zany names like Blooper, Super Duper Deluxe, Tough High PLA plus plus plus, and many others, where would you direct me to?
Well, I feel like that one's a lead up, but
maybe
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I am an engineer and I am not a salesperson. So a lot of the times when I'm talking about things, I will love to talk about how I make things, how I work on things. I really don't want to be the guy that's just blindly saying, hey, we have the best stuff that I think has ever been born or whatever. So yes, to answer that specifically with those questions, I think we are the only company that has things like super duper high speed PLA plus plus and Blue Pitter and stuff. So of course, polarfilament.com. But that being said, at every rep festival, if you've ever seen me, you will know that I hang out with a lot of other filament manufacturers. I see a bunch of them in the chat. Everybody is super cool. So meet everybody, hang out. We're all a lot of fun to talk to.
There you go. Any others? Where can we find you guys on the socials? I think somebody seen earlier. You must not be on Twitter because they said a petition for.
Yeah, I'm not on Twitter. I don't use Twitter is my problem. So I spend a lot of time on TikTok and Discord. So Discord is discord.polarfilament.com. That's also right on our homepage. All of our socials are on polarfilament.com. TikTok is just at Polar Filament. Everything else is kind of like a derivative of that. I'm starting to get more into Instagram Reels. So if you guys want to make my life easier, go check out Reels because that is something I'm kind of pushing for a lot more. But I've learned that each platform has a completely different personality. I mean, Twitch is a completely different personality than YouTube. And I've just never personally used Twitter. So like to be good at it, I mean, I could sit there and respond to some messages, but like in order to really excel or seem like you're alive, I feel like everybody's got their own like personality. So that's, I don't know, maybe we'll get into it, but I feel like I'm scared if I created it right now, then it would just be like an empty tag and it would be not as active as you'd probably want it to be. And I think that's worse than not being on it at all. But
so basically Discord is where TikTok and then Instagram. Don't forget the Instagram. And on that, is it just Polar Filament?
Yep, Polar Filament for everything.
There you go. Well, I greatly appreciate you coming on. It is great to hear another filament company talk about what they love, and you definitely love what you do, it seems. So with that said, you're gonna be at 3D Printopia?
Yeah, are you gonna be there?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome.
So I'll be there. I'll be there. So yeah, we'll meet up, and obviously guys go by, say hi. Mitch is a super easy, fun guy to talk to, answer any questions. I know I've annoyed him at many different reps with many questions, and just a great guy. So thank you for being on the show. Wish you guys luck. Can't wait to see what else comes out from you guys, and we'll see you here in a few months.
Yeah, and if Polymaker ever wants US branded filament, I could point you in the right direction. Just saying.
I think I know a guy I can talk to.
All righty. Well, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, thank you very much, Mitch. You have a good night.
All right. See ya.
Yeah. So that is Polar Filament. Mitch from there is a great guy. Like I said, I've talked to him many times at the events. Fun to talk to. Cookie Cat, we see you in the chat too. It's always fun talking to you guys. Definitely look forward to having you guys on the show. So it's fun. That what's awesome that Polymaker #1 gives me the ability to do this show, and that we can get on other filament companies. It's not a cutthroat and this and that. You know, Nick has a passion for everything across the board, and it's awesome to be able to share that with them and get on people of different filament companies, you know, learn about what they're doing and be able to share their stuff too, because there are many great filaments out there. You know, everybody, you know, makes certain colors, certain styles, and there is many, many good ones, few bad ones, but but many good ones. So look forward to maybe having Cookie Cat on here in the future. So we'll get that set up. But with that said, this is the Meet the Polymaker. We do go live every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. And right now, which I'm going to pull this up, let me flick over here. There we go. If you haven't done so yet, before I rattle on here, make sure to type in "I am awesome." That is going to be just for the YouTube and the Twitch side. TikTok, we don't have you activated there, but go over to twitch.tv/polymaker_3D or youtube.com/@polymaker. Real quick, sign in real quick and just type in "I am awesome." It'll enter you for a chance to win the filament here in just a couple minutes. And with that said, this is Polymaker. If you like what we do here, you like what you see, you like what you watch, Nick does some really cool, very in-depth streams, which I hope to see. We're going to see him start getting back into. And then, of course, just a lot of cool projects, a lot of things they share through the socials. Follow them. They're on everything. TikTok, Instagram. We are on Twitter, or X if you want to call it that. Facebook. Across the board, definitely give us a follow if you like what you see and you enjoyed the filament. Lots of new stuff coming out next week for those in the U.S., a little bit later for the other rest of the world, but we'll get you taken care of. We also do a lot of other projects. We have our Polymaker figurines project, which is ran by Antoine Dimensions, and he does every 2-day video of a new a new Pokemon figure, which then that model is released on Maker World for free. Those videos are fun. He does some fun things in between some of the videos, but those listings, once the models come available, will tell you what colors he used in the video. You can do it in solid color, you can do it in multicolor, but he's going to be doing all first 151. I need to count because I think he's at 40 or something. It's ridiculous. I've done some miniature versions, which turned out really good, but he does big ones, and I think he's got a room dedicated just to that, I would imagine, because they're huge. But you can do them all sorts of different scales. Again, follow them if you like Pokemon or you just like multicolor printing. Antoine Dimensions is a fun guy anyway. Hopefully have him on here soon also. But we also have Polymaker Education. That's Polymaker_education across the board again. TikTok, YouTube, everywhere. And that is ran by Creatrix Brit. And she does, right now she's doing, I think every 2 days also. She's spitting out the videos like crazy too. A lot of educational stuff for kids, learn about motor functions or helping with motor functions, learning food safety, world safety, vehicles. There's a lot of different things that she's done, a lot more to come. They do the same thing as when she does the video, that model is available on Maker World. So you can print it yourself. You can do the same tasks that she shows. And she usually gives a couple different options of using a certain thing for food safety, but also using multiple for counting. There's just a lot of cool, fun stuff to work with if you work with children or if you have children of your own. It is definitely a fun thing to watch, and she's got good energy. So go follow those. And last but not least, we also have our one and only Pezliz. She is at twitch.tv/Pezliz. She does a Polymaker sponsored show in printing color, and that is every Wednesday on her Twitch channel. I think she's going to be starting to do YouTube also, but I don't think live, I think just videos. But either way, awesome creator. Make sure to follow her. There's a lot of new colors coming out with the Panchroma stuff that she is going to have a whole list of things and a lot of cool videos coming out. So definitely, if you are not already following her, follow her. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and do the drawing. So if you haven't done it yet, I am awesome. Get in there and chat, YouTube, Twitch, hopefully TikTok land. You kind of came over if you're over there, but we're going to do that drawing here in 5 seconds. And who is going to win? I don't think we had a YouTube winner yet. So make sure YouTube, I'm going to give you a few seconds. There you go. I seen one come in there. Make sure YouTube, I am awesome. Nothing against you guys over in Twitch, but Twitch is one, I think. I'll have to go back, but maybe every time. I need to get some stats going here. But we're going to draw real quick here as soon as my mouse comes back. spin the wheel, wait for a winner. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be YouTube? Either way, everybody here is awesome, whether you win or not. Joe Lambic on Twitch, you are the winner of a spool of filament. Builder's Mark on Q, Sean.Aranda. I need to make sure I'm pronouncing that right. I need to ask him if I'm butchering it when I say it. At polymaker.com or Polymaker Sean on the Discord. You can message him there. What you do is let him know, Joe, that you won on Meet the Polymaker on 7/18/2024. He'll verify all that. We'll get you a voucher for a free spool of filament. So if you hold out, it typically has like a 3-month expiration. Hold out, use it on some of that new Panchroma or Fibron stuff. But thank you all for your support. We're going strong. Like I said, 20 episodes in. We're going to continue it. We're going to continue having new people every week. And I hope to continue seeing all of you here next week. So with that said, I almost ended it there. We're going to raid. And this time I'm going to raid out to /raid. I need to get a button for this. But who do we got that is live and at their machine doing their stuff? Just want to make sure that I pop into the Discord, into the Twitch and see what they're doing. Let's see here. I'm printing. You know what? I see we have Kelly Cakes. Not 3D printing, but an awesome maker. We support all makers. And I love cake. If you guys have seen me in person, you know I love cake. So we're going to raid out to Kelly Cakes. Let's see here. Kelly Cakes. Make sure I have that right. It's been created. So with that said, make sure to give Kelly Cakes our love. Tell them, Polymaker, Meet the Polymaker, Nicor, all three sent you. So show the support there. Definitely appreciate you guys again. And you all have a great week, a great weekend, and we'll see you here next week.